very good evening to everyone and welcome to the second session of Finanza 21, Exploring Beyond the Balance Sheet. In today's session, our special guest speaker will share his knowledge and experience with us on the topic of current trends and the potential of the stock market. It is my great pleasure to welcome our head of the department, Dr. M. Shamil, the senior lecturer, Professor C. Pathiravasam, the stream coordinator, Dr. Madhurikana Nayakara, and all the lecturers who are present here today. I am truly honored to welcome our very special guest of today's session, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake. Furthermore, I am pleased to welcome all the participants who have gathered here today for the session. First of all, let me introduce the guest speaker of today's session, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake. He is the Chief Executive Officer at the Colombo Stock Exchange and has served in a senior management capacity at the Stock Exchange in trading, clearing and settlement, branch development, marketing, human resources, and has led several market development initiatives. He has also served as the Chief Executive Officer at 2 listed companies and has 30 years of experience in financial services. With that, I cordially invite Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening to all of you today. Thank you, Damini, for that introduction. And I would also like to thank the Students Association of the Financial Management at the University of Kelaniya for very kindly inviting me today to Finanza 21. And the topic is exploring beyond the balance sheet, which is probably a good thing to do. So happy to be here and to share some perspectives and thoughts. I'll just share my presentation. I hope all of you all can see it. To all the lecturers who are joining this session and dear students, what I thought I'll do today, as invited to share some perspectives, some thoughts about the current trends in the market, and also to talk about the potential. So I'll be, for the most part, talking about some of the issues and some of the challenges that that are in the capital market of Sri Lanka. So to put things into perspective, I thought I'll just elaborate on the prevailing global environment. And it's good to understand, I don't think there's anything new for you here, but just to have things in perspective, we know that globally, the global economy has had its challenges over the last 2 years. But according to IMF, we know that it's expected to bottom out this year and then record back again a positive growth. Of course, IMF says 6%, but we don't know what figure it will end up with. We know that the global economy has lost a fair deal over the last 2-year period due to the pandemic, primarily attributed to the pandemic. And as you all know, the Sri Lankan economy too has contracted, but then again, keeping in sync with the global economic developments. And according to ADB, once again, I think the Sri Lankan economy is supposed to bottom out this year and then post a growth. ADB says something between 3.5% to 4%. We know that Sri Lanka did face economic growth challenge, and many industries within Sri Lanka slowed down considerably. I think tourism was one, and also some of our export industries. But at the same time, if you look at the stock market particularly closely, you will find that some of the sectors really benefited and did very well, particularly in terms of logistics, etc. We see that those companies have fared very well. So overall, the economic vibrancy will come in, I think, once our core sectors return to normal, and also again dependent on, of course, the global recovery as well. So with that very little introduction, let us go into capital markets. And again, probably this is nothing new to you, but nevertheless, good to recap as to why capital markets are important. We know that it's a mechanism by which the private sector will raise capital. The government, less to do with equity borrowing, but rather with debt financing. Recently, the Ceylon Electricity Board, I don't know how many of you all are aware, the Ceylon Electricity Board raised 20 billion in terms of a listed debenture. So we have seen the government coming in mostly for borrowings through debt instruments. We've had the UDA coming in previously. There's also a capital market can be a catalyst for foreign investment, as you know, and we will see those figures in a little while as to what direction it has taken. But potentially a capital market can attract foreign investors. One of the core roles is to bring in foreign investors as well. Then, of course, it promotes economic growth, as you know, wealth creation for investors. So by investing your savings in the market, into shares, and with capital appreciation, you will say that the wealth of the shareholder will grow, and that creates wealth for shareholders and those investors. And it'll help companies to raise capital, set up new industries, expand their enterprises, and in turn generate new employment opportunities, and then have an impact on the GDP of the country. So it has an economic benefit as well, and of course lowers the cost of capital, definitely. It also provides a diversification opportunity for investors. So investors have a wider choice, quite apart from the traditional sources of investment into fixed income instruments, maybe money market instruments, real estate, gold. So you also have equities, and then corporate debentures as well. So it provides some level of diversification for investors. And then also, more importantly, it promotes sound corporate governance practices. Now, if you look at, I don't know how many of you all are aware, we had an IPO last week, which closed, JAT Holdings. JAT is a fairly common household name now. So they listed their company. They had a successful IPO. It closed on the very day it opened, fully oversubscribed. And the CEO of that company, we both were in a panel recently. And in that panel discussion, he made a very interesting point. And he said, one of the things that their company looked for is that through a listing, that they can have better governance practices within their company, and that will help them to improve the governance and management of the company. So that's very important. You can see that companies are coming in and getting listed with those principles in mind. So corporate governance is now being sought after by certain companies, and a listing will give those corporate governance practices, inculcate those corporate governance practices into those companies. So those are the reasons why a capital market is important for a country. And if you take different jurisdictions, different countries, capital markets have assumed different degrees of importance. And I'll try to share some figures as well. In certain economies, the capital markets plays a fairly pivotal role, and a significant role. In certain other economies, to a lesser degree. So it all depends to the degree to which that particular capital markets have evolved and developed in the country. Now, if you look at our capital market, share trading has been around for a very, very long time, since 1896, well over 100 years. But share trading in its present form has a history of only 35 years, since the Colombo Stock Exchange was incorporated in 1985. So that's the time the market was taken out from Colombo to the regions, to the people, and introduced in all three languages and made accessible. So we have a relatively short history when you look at our capital market. In comparison to, for example, India, and they have a very long history, about 150 years of share trading tradition, so that the ordinary man on the street also knows what a capital market is, what a stock market is, what a share is, as opposed to, as well as they know the banking sector. Whereas in Sri Lanka, you will find that many people know and understand banking very well, but to a far lesser degree capital markets, because we have had a shorter time to ingrain that in the minds of the people. And even if you look at students and schools, when I was in school at A levels, we were actually not taught about capital markets or stock markets. We hardly knew anything about it. It is only now that it is being included in syllabuses, etc., and those training and that knowledge and education is being imparted. But if you take our generation, we were not educated on the stock market. So I think it's a process over time where people will learn to understand, know markets, and then you build that awareness, and in turn you build a larger base of people who access capital markets. So that's as a very slight introduction to where we are today. So where are we today? If you look at a kind of a positioning, now stock exchanges, depositories, clearing houses, those are all the connected organizations to stock exchanges, are known as capital market infrastructure providers, CMIP. So globally, we are part of a World Federation of Stock Exchange, as it were. So globally, there are 250 such institutions. Okay, and in Sri Lanka, there are 3. I don't know whether you can guess what the 3 institutions are. There are 3 institutions which can be considered as a capital market infrastructure provider. One is the Colombo Stock Exchange. Second is the Central Depository System, a wholly owned subsidiary of the CDS, which provides services as a depository. And the third one, which is under the central bank, is the Central Bank Depository for fixed income securities or government securities. So we have 3 such institutions within Sri Lanka, and globally we have 250 such institutions. If you take listed companies globally, we have nearly 48,000 companies that are listed in the different markets, which form part of this global ecosystem. And in Sri Lanka, we have actually more than 285. We have about 290 companies that are listed currently in the stock market for equity. Other than that, there are a couple of other companies who have listed debt as well. If you look at the market capitalization, globally, the market capitalization is 109 trillion US dollars, I think, as at end of June. And in Sri Lanka, we are just at US dollars 18 billion. So relatively a very small size of the pie in Sri Lanka, but nevertheless, that's how large we are. In terms of rupees, I think it's about 3.3 trillion in terms of rupees, but in terms of US dollars, for comparative purposes, it's about 18 billion US dollars. So that's the size of the market. Just to tell you what this classification is, markets are classified into developed markets, emerging markets, frontier markets, and standalone markets. Now, Sri Lanka is classified as a frontier market. So in Asia, our colleagues are Bangladesh and Vietnam. And in future, it will be Pakistan, because Pakistan was elevated or promoted to emerging market status, but they are being demoted back, unfortunately, as a frontier market. So our closest competitors, so when foreign investors invest their funds, they generally allocate funds according to your standing, either as emerging markets or a frontier market. So when they allocate funds into frontier markets, they look at Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam and allocate accordingly. So once Pakistan moved out, we benefited because there were only 3. So Pakistan coming back, we'll have greater competition because there'll be 4 companies, 4 countries in that classification. So this is broadly how we are classified as a frontier market, and our next step will be emerging markets. But if we get to emerging markets, we have to compete for funds with very large countries and economies like Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, Korea, China, India. So very powerful countries. So we need to be really ready and prepared before we go there. So that's where we are currently as a frontier markets. All right, so let's look at some of the challenges and opportunities for the capital market, and we'll delve a little deep into those. So I have listed here 3 challenges. One is containing the pandemic and how it will impact our society and our economy. I don't think I have to delve on it too much because you already know the kind of havoc it has created in society as a social means and also on the economy, and how particularly the small and medium sector is suffering as a result of the lockdowns and the restrictions. So there are various arguments to and fro, but end of the day, you need to have the economy running as well in order to service the larger interests of the population. So by closing it, it's not an answer. So we're happy that the vaccination drive is coming, and we're hopeful that once fully vaccinated, we'll be in a better position to operate businesses within the economy. So containing the pandemic is of a primary challenge for the government, for any one of us, I think. Then the second big issue is about attracting foreign investment, and I'll get to that in a moment. And there are challenges there. And thirdly is about managing the exchange rate, because that has given us a lot of headaches as well. So these are three key challenges that I like to highlight. So let's start off with the negative growth rate. I think this chart is nothing new to you. You know how the economy contracted. We had a steady decline in the growth in the country, and then unfortunately last year we ended up with the negative growth. But again, the good news is that we might turn around this year. If you look at the currency, once again, the changes in the currency, and this is a real problem that we are having. As you know, the dollar has touched over 200. The black market rate is even higher, and the resultant headaches and the problems that we are experiencing currently, mostly as an import economy, that the USD exchange rate is a big challenge to all of us. Now, two key issues that we are having as a result of the exchange rate and certain other reasons, which I will just mention. If you look at the foreign direct investment, and I have given this graph will indicate that in the last 3 years, 2018, 2019, and then 2020, there's a steep decline in foreign direct investment. So on one hand, we have seen a decline in the quantum of investments that have come into the country as foreign direct investments. And to add to our woes, we are also seeing a net outflow of the portfolio investments, that is through the stock market. So since 2018, you can see the net outflows. We have had foreigners buying, we have had foreigners coming in. We still have foreigners buying in, but the net, it has still been outflow. And that's again a cause for concern, because we are seeing continuous outflows in 2018, 2019, 2020, and even this year so far, we have had a 33 billion net outflow. So both on the FDI side as well as on the portfolio side, we have had continuous outflows, which is causing concern, because that's desperately what Sri Lanka would need to get out of the debt trap. So we need to get investments rather than loans and debt. And this is where we have a real challenge. Now, what are the reasons why? Okay, just another illustration of how the equation has changed as far as the stock market is concerned. In 2018, if you see, foreign investors accounted for about 44%. And if I draw an analogy and give you some idea, foreign investors has been a mainstay in the Sri Lankan stock markets since the early 1990s. And broadly, anything between 30 to 45% has been their share of investment right along. Of course, there has been, these are hot money flows. They go out as soon as much as they come in. You can't avoid that. And we have had periods where money has gone out, but it has always come back again. So on one hand, we don't have to be unduly worried, because we had previous cycles where money has gone out for various reasons, not only for reasons pertaining to Sri Lanka, but global reasons, where foreigners have taken their money out of Asia but then come back again. Now, initially, most of this money started going out not because of fears about Sri Lanka alone, but due to pandemic and other reasons. Foreign investors, predominantly from the US and UK and Europe, pulled out their money from Asia back into the West. So that's what really happened. Not only us, all the markets almost in Asia suffered, and we have had a fair share. So the foreign investor contribution, you can see from 44% in 2018 has dropped to about 8% currently. So there's a fair amount of shift from foreign to local. The good thing is our market fortunately had local individuals who jumped into the market, who came into the market and started investing in a fairly significant way. So if you see the local individual figure from 22%, it has gone up to 56%. Local companies have largely remained the same. So they have not sold out. Those are local institutional investment, like both in the government and the private sector. Like you talk about EPF, ETF, Sri Lanka Insurance, and most of the portfolio investors and the unit trusts. They have largely remained, but the local individuals have really got in a big way into the stock market, and there's a reason for that. The low interest rate environment, which I will show in a moment, has prompted a lot of local retail investors to liquidate their fixed income investments and put it into the stock market, because stock market is giving better returns. So as an investor, you wouldn't want 4 to 5% return on your investment, because you can't survive with that. But the market has been giving in excess of 10 or 15% return. So they have moved their money. That's the reason why the market is very active, and we have seen a whole heap of new local investors coming in. So fortunately, the exit of foreign has been cushioned by the local investors taking to the market. So that we have seen. Now, one of the reasons why foreign investors have opted to leave, and we need to correct this, and I think the government is taking certain measures to address this, is the rating. So I have just tracked the rating from 2013. We were at BB minus, and then as you can see, if you follow the downgrades, in 2016 we got a downgrade, then we got a downgrade in 2018, then another one in 2020, and then now we have been downgraded to CCC, which is not a very good rating in order to attract foreign investors. Now, foreign investors, by their mandates, sometimes are prevented from investing in markets that are below a particular rating. So their ideal rating is BBB. Okay, that's far away, let's say. But at least if we are at a BB, then we may be able to attract the kind of investment that we require. So I think it's very important that we get our rating back. And for that, maybe a lot of reforms have to be done. We need to work very hard to make this rating attractive again in order to attract both foreign portfolio and foreign direct investments. Now, this is more relevant to portfolio investment rather than foreign direct. But having this rating, it doesn't prevent foreign investors from coming. And we have seen selectively certain foreign investors who have still come and invested despite this rating. We have seen them coming into Commercial Bank, for example, NDB Bank recently. They came in, invested, they bought up Primal Glass. So there have been selected foreign investors who have come and bought into companies where they think there is potential. So even though we may have this rating, we still have foreign buying. So it's not to say that nobody will come in, there is foreign buying. But if we want that quantum of foreign investment to come in, we need to improve our rating. And that's what the government and a lot of economic agencies are working on in the moment to improve this, because this rating becomes a critical factor. So I just highlighted the CCC, the Fitch rating, where CCC is considered as a default, maybe in the offing. So that's their classification. But I think we should have confidence in the government that they will meet all their obligations. And I think that is true. They will meet all the obligations this year without much of a problem. They have, I think, the funds lined up in order to make the debt settlements on time this year. So there is no question of default. And in fact, if you read a recent commentary by a leading US-based investment bank, where they commented and said that they are confident that Sri Lanka will meet its debt servicing obligations this year. So which is probably a good signal for us, but we cannot rest here. A lot of effort has to be made to get back on particularly in terms of the rate. Okay, so those are the challenges. So we have the rating challenge, we have the exchange rate challenge to contend with. So those are real challenges, and of course the broader economic challenges that we have in terms of economic activity and growth. But if we see it bottoming out, the negative growth, and we have global factors that will impact on Sri Lanka. For example, if we can get tourism back on track, if we can get our exports really back on track, and if we can open the country to function normally economically, hopefully we will have a better year going forward for next year. So those are three key challenges which we need to keep in mind all the time, even when you're talking about capital markets, which you will see in a moment. So let's now focus on some other opportunities. Now I have listed down a whole heap of opportunities. The potential to increase the size and liquidity of the market, the opportunity to have pension reforms, which will again have a positive impact on the market, the low interest rate environment that we have, the low valuations we have in our market, the strong corporate earnings growth, diversification opportunities, then market infrastructure developments that we are hoping to do, then SMEs, capital raising for SMEs, and then of course greater market accessibility. And I'll share some data with you, which you can see that how market has been made more accessible through a digitization process as well. So just a quick snapshot, and again, I'm sure you would have seen this, the change in interest rates, fairly significant over the period. And we are now at just between 4 and 5%. Just another graphical illustration of the low interest rate regime. If you look at the average weighted deposit rate or the prime lending rate, also there are declines in both. And even if you look at the standing deposit rate facility, the SDFR of central bank, and the lending facility rate as well, there has been a decline continuously from about 2020. So this is one reason why our stock market is active, simply because there's a very strong correlation between the all share price, the price indices in the market, and interest rates. Now let us have a quick look at our some of the valuations. If you look at the market PE, we are currently at 11 times. Of course, we were at a all-time high in 2010, post-war, and then again in 2014, we had valuations in excess of 19%, 19 times that time. And now today, we are at 11 times. Now, even if you see the price to book, it's 1.16 and a very healthy dividend yield at 2.5%. I think we are more than, for example, our neighbor India in terms of dividend yields. So this, we believe, is quite a healthy picture, because the valuations are attractive enough at 11 times for both investors as well as companies, because the prices have to be right to encourage companies to come and list. Otherwise, they will find it unattractive. Now, for example, in 2018, our PE is something like 9 times. So it was not worth for companies to come into the capital market to raise capital, because they could not get the price that they desired. So the company owners will not want to flock their company at a cheap price. They'll want to get the best price for the company. At the same time, it's a fine act. You also have to have investors who are willing to pay that price. So we feel that 10 or 11 times is a good place to be in to attract companies to come and list, because they find that the valuations are attractive enough for them to come in. And we have seen as a result, our primary market getting reactivated in 2021 this year. Already we have had 4 successful IPOs. All 4 IPOs have been oversubscribed on the opening day itself. And we have seen that the share price has been trading above the issued price, which is very important. That means investors are able to make money off the IPO. If you see the situation previously, we had, again, let me first get to that when I share some of those statistics. Investors in the period prior to that, we had very few IPOs actually, but even those few IPOs that came, unfortunately, the market price dropped below the issued price. So there is no appetite, both on the part of investors, because they felt that no point investing in a IPO because I'm getting a lesser price once it starts the secondary trading. And for companies, they are struggling to find the subscription and the environment was not right. But now the situation has changed quite significantly, and we have seen now companies opting to come. We even had our first SME company listing as well this year, and we have at least about another 15 companies in the pipeline who are waiting to come in to list their shares and raise capital. So far, I think about 7.5 billion rupees for this first 6 months. We have seen capital raising worth 7.5 billion. I think that's after about 10 or 11 years that we are seeing that amount of capital being raised through the market. So that's as far as valuations are concerned. Going a little beyond our shores, globally, this charts indicates the valuations, P's, market P's, relative to other markets. So if you compare our all share and the S&P, we can see that we are relatively cheaper than most markets. Cheaper than India, cheaper than Thailand, cheaper than Indonesia, cheaper than Philippines, cheaper than Malaysia, cheaper than Vietnam, somewhere close to Pakistan. So regionally, and of course, if you look at the developed markets as well, their P's are way, way above. So which means we offer value to an investor, because you will generally as an investor go to a market where the P's are not too much, because there's potential for growth. When the P is low, PVP is at 10 times, there is potential to grow, so they can come in and invest and exit with a profit. So as a result, our market right now, compared to other valuations in other markets, are trading at a discount, and therefore making our market attractive. So some of the conditions to attract foreign investors are there. We need to get certain things right. For example, the rating right, etc. But other conditions in terms of valuations are right to attract these investors. And that's why when I did mention that there were certain foreign investors who have opted to come in and invest in selected companies. This is one of the reasons, because they feel that the valuations are right. So important to remember, valuations are opportunity and we can attract them. Then we take a quick look at if you compare the SPI performance with the Morgan Stanley Capital Index, both the frontier markets index and the emerging markets index, you can see that the ASPI is sitting on top there and comfortably giving better returns, whether you take a 3-year performance, whether you take a March 31st, 2020 to date performance, or whether you take year to date 2021 performance. We see the ASPI has outperformed both the other frontier markets indices and the emerging markets indices. So even in terms of market performance, we can place ourselves and say, we can give you better returns than some of the other markets that you may normally invest in, both on the frontier space. Remember, I spoke about Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Pakistan as well, and certain larger economies in the emerging market space. So we have performed better. So both in terms of valuations and in terms of performance, price performance, index performance, we have positions ourselves very well to attract foreign. Another measurement is this turnover velocity, and this graph shows you this measure of turnover velocity, which is the market turnover divided by the market cap, and that's a measure of how liquid the market is. So up to about 2019, our turnover velocity figures was about 6%, which was very low. But with the retail investment picking up, with the activity levels picking up, we have seen the turnover velocity almost doubling in 2020 and almost a further double up to 28% this year. So we have seen significant growth in the liquidity in the market, which is again a very positive sign. And if you look at the period up to 2019, end of 2019, for a day, we had just about 5,000 transactions, about 5,000 at the maximum, mostly 3,000, 4,000, at a maximum 5,000. And today, this year, we are doing a minimum of 22,000 to 25,000 transactions a day. So it's a five-fold increase in the number of transactions, which can show you the level of the increase in the level of activity and liquidity in the market. So it's a good sign, once again, whether it's for institutional, whether it's for retail, or whether it's for foreign, to have a liquid market, because that will enable any investor to enter and exit the market easier than in a liquid market. Because when you try to enter a liquid market, you will have an impact on price. Okay, and again, when you try to exit, again it will have an impact on price, because once the market gets to know that somebody is trying to exit, the market will generally move against you, and you find that your average cost of either selling you are losing, or if you are entering the market, you will find that in order to acquire shares, you will find it more expensive, because when you start collecting, the price moves against you. So it's far better to operate in a liquid market than an illiquid market. And now the conditions are being set in a kind of liquid market, so that investors will have an easier, cheaper entry and exit. So that's a third opportunity that we can identify today. So let me share with you the market cap to GDP. Again, another measurement as to judge, as I told you earlier, how much the stock market accounts for in the overall economy. And we have compared ourselves to Bangladesh, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. Now, Singapore is considered a developed market. So you can see that the market cap to GDP ratio is about 180%. So if you look at the emerging markets like Thailand, India, Malaysia, they're all in excess of 100%. So their market cap to GDP is over 100%. Then we have the frontier markets like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka at about a 20%. Now here, the good thing about this is there is a lot of potential for growth. That means there is opportunity for investors to come in and grow with the market. There's potential for market growth, so that there is potential for more companies to come in and get listed, both in the private sector and in the government sector. And as a result, you will see that there is Sri Lanka, and both Bangladesh, Sri Lanka has the potential to grow. Whereas if you take markets like Thailand, India, Malaysia, it's fairly saturated, because they have already reached a 100%. And unless they reach a developed market status like Singapore, it's difficult to do that next jump into a 200% level. So right now they are somewhat saturated, but Sri Lanka, on the other hand, like Bangladesh, has very good opportunity and the potential to grow. So this again, we feel is an opportunity, a low market cap to GDP ratio. So let me now share with you the performance metrics of a comparison with regional markets. And if you compare our, this is the all share price index. If you compare with the some of the other markets, the returns, you can see that we have outperformed very well some of the other markets in the region. Whether you take a year to date, it's about a 20%. You take a 1 year, or even if you take a shorter period of 1 month, still we have seen our market performing relatively better than some of the other markets in the region. So these are just a few statistics which we will not bother about. So let's go back to take a snapshot of the evolution of our market, because it's important to understand this equation as well. As you know, we had a civil war running up to 2009, and you can very clearly see that the market was in a very subdued state up till 2009. So it was, the index was below 3,000, and it was so for a very long time, from 1990s when the market started growing up to 2009 till the war was over. So we have seen a fairly static movement in the index, and the index shooting up only after that. And after that, we have got to a different trajectory. We have got to the 6,000 or 7,000 levels as we know. Of course, different, there is volatility. There is volatility. You can see the pandemic also hitting us in 2020 and the market crash, but we have recovered since then. But the important thing here to remember is a lot of people talk about why the capital market did not progress, why it did not develop, why couldn't you have got 500 companies listing all these 35 years. One of the main reasons was that market was largely held back as a result of this civil conflict. And it is only in 2010 and beyond that we moved to a far more significant level of operating. And that's where the real development started happening. Of course, in between there, we had a multitude of issues, both political and economic issues, which again, unfortunately, impacted on the direction of our capital market. And we have had the resultant volatility, and we did not have a sustained, at least a 5-year period of economic growth in order for the capital market to really grow and develop, unfortunately. Either an economic crisis or a political crisis hit. And as a result, you can see the kind of volatility it experienced even after 2010 period, right up to today. So good to have this at the back of your mind. Just another graphical illustration of the two price indices, which may be important and maybe short 2 periods as well, from 2011 up to 2020 and 2021. I have marked the current SPI level that is at just above 8,000 points. And we can see the volatility, the short-term volatility of the index. And if you chart the S&P index, again, S&P has been performing very well earlier at 3,000 levels. These are mostly due to the level of high foreign investment that we had. So this S&P is a good reflection of the level of foreign investor interest, because you see that foreign investors largely would buy stocks that are in the S&P SL20 index, because there is a larger and the more liquid stocks. So when the foreign investment was at a high level, you can see the index performing very well. And then when foreigners started selling out, you can see how well the clearly you can see that the index has gone below the 3,000 point, but now again it has come back to a 3,000 level. But in the absence of any foreign investment, we can see how the S&P index has suffered. Whereas if you go for the all share price index, this is driven mostly by retail, and that's why you see the sudden peak in the 2020-21 period. So those are the subtle difference between the two price indices. And again, if I give a different illustration to show you what I just told you, how the S&P suffered as a result of the outflows. So there is a correlation between foreigners moving out of the market and the performance of the S&P index. And then again, if you take the all share price index, which is the broad market index, you can see the impact that with the retail investors coming in, and it has been driving the market up. So that's very clearly reflected in the two indices. So if you look at the levels of activity that I described, again, the number of new accounts open, we have seen after a period of saturation up to about 2019, we have seen the number of accounts being opened gone up quite drastically, up to about 140 accounts per day from a low of about 40 accounts a day. So there's a significant number of new people who are joining the market, as you can well see. And this chart will show you what is interesting is that 97% of the local individual accounts that are opened are all opened online now, no longer manual, since we went into a process of digitalization. And it was about 50% earlier and less even earlier. So now we have seen a shift into online account openings. And what is most interesting, which I will show you in a moment, is that over 80% or nearly 90% of those who have opened accounts in the last, say, 6 months or so have been those who are below 40 years of age. Now, traditionally, the stock market has had a 50 plus investor category, but there is a trend and a shift to a younger, more savvy, tech savvy set of investors right now. And that's a good sign, so that we are seeing a younger set coming in, and a bulk of the accounts that are being opened are opened from a younger set of investors, as you can see from this chart. So very clearly there is a shift. Now this digitalization that we enabled, what prompted us was the first lockdown. When we had the first lockdown and stockbrokers couldn't go to their offices, we were closed. We were forced to close the market. And as a result, we very quickly enabled an end-to-end total digitalization of the market. As a result, anybody now from any part of the country can use the mobile app, open an account, get access to internet trading, and even make settlement digitally without ever having to visit a stockbroking firm. So that's a significant development that has prompted a 70% increase in the number of new accounts and retail investors who are joining the market as a result of this convenience and accessibility. And we did something unique this time. For the first time, we tied up with the Department of the Register of Persons. That's the identity card office. So when, as an investor, when you onboard yourself, when you enter your details into the app, when you take a screenshot, then you take a shot of your ID and send it to the stockbroker. The stockbroker will, through the stock exchange, connect to the ID office, do an online verification with the identity card office records. Through the identity card you have submitted, do an online identity verification, and then approve the accounts. So there's an online KYC for the first time in Sri Lanka that is happening. So completely seamless and online, and then access is given, internet access is given. The broker might speak to the investor and then grant the person the access. And then you have all the information coming to you, the online, the research reports, and all of that also being shared with you. And then you can conduct your trading activity. You don't need to come at all and visit a stockbroking firm. You get your statements online. You get it. You can now even log in and through the internet check your balances. You can transfer your portfolios from one broker to another, do master file changes. So all of that has been enabled. And the beauty of it is, if you analyze some of the new accounts that have been opened, only 57% are from the Western province. So the balance is actually from areas outside Colombo, which means the market is also getting broad-based, which is also one of the key objectives of all of us, is to broad-base. So all that is happening, and the enabler we found is the digitalization and a younger set of investors coming into the market. So something good that I did also share with you. Just some figures, again, daily average turnover. This indication of the levels of activity. We were averaging 700 million up to about 2019. As you can see the top chart, it has increased to 1.8 billion in 2020. And if you look at this year, we are at 3.8 billion a day. And if you look at market capitalization, it's an all-time high at 3.6 trillion as of date. Just a quick snapshot of the investor contribution purchases. You can see that bulk of it is by LI, means the local individual category at the end. 56% of the purchases have been through local individuals. 38% have been by local companies, and foreigners have accounted for about 4.5%. So that's the distribution. If you look at the investor sales, again, the bulk of the activity has been from locals, and foreigners have accounted for about 11% of the sales in the market. And overall, if you look at the contribution, again, it's 55% and 36% for the local institutional investors. In terms of capital raise, I think I spoke about this briefly, about how companies are coming in to raise capital. So we have seen a definite shift and a trend towards the primary market. If you look at the total capital raise, so when I say total capital raise, equity, debt, rights issues, private placements, all of that, so far to date for the first 6 months, there's 69 billion that has been raised to the market. So it's only 6 months. Now for the entirety of last year, we have only raised 61 billion in total. If you take 2019, 77 billion. So if the trend continues as we go, probably this will be a record year, because in 6 months we have reached 69 billion. And for the balance 6 months, there are some more to come. We probably will surpass the 2018 figure of 104 billion as well. So we can see a clear reactivation of the primary market for some of the reasons that I also did mention. Okay, let me now focus on again some of the market infrastructure and the new products that we are going to introduce, and let me spend a little bit of time on this. So we're going to plan some new products. We plan some market infrastructure initiatives which will impact positively on the market as well. And I'll just talk a little bit about them. So for 2021, firstly, we have proposed a multi-currency listing for local companies, so that when local companies want to raise US denominated capital, particularly this is important for export oriented companies, when they want to raise US dollar denominated capital, we have opened up a special board, and we are now in the process of seeking the necessary regulatory approval. Central Bank has already, the Cabinet of Ministers has already approved it. Now the Central Bank is in the process of drawing up the regulations under that to allow local companies to access foreign capital. So they will be able to, they need not go to Singapore and other places in Asia to raise capital. So while in Sri Lanka itself, by using the facilities of the CSC, they can raise dollar denominated capital by selling their shares, which be a different class of share, to any foreign investor, and then utilize those proceeds to expand regionally and to do their export work as well. So that's a significant development where local companies are concerned, particularly for export-oriented companies. Though we are hoping to launch that this year. A lot of work already has been done. The second product is a gold product. We are working with the banks currently as we speak to introduce a paper-based product for gold in collaboration with the bank, so that as an investor, you could make use of the market and invest in gold, units of gold as well, giving a diversification opportunity for investors. A third product which we have worked on, we have already got the necessary regulatory approvals from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and now in the process of onboarding primary dealers and other debt dealers into our framework to have repos being traded on the secondary market in terms of debt, for corporate debt. So right now we have a corporate debt market where you invest in a primary issue and then you hold till maturity. But there is no liquid market, a secondary market for corporate debt. So we are creating a mechanism and an OTC market for the secondary trading of those corporate debentures. So a repo market, and we believe that it will attract a fair bit of interest among the dealers, and we will have a fairly active secondary market in corporate debt, and that's another instrument that we will encourage. Then the third new product that we have had is the SME companies. We opened a separate new board for SME companies, and we have had the first SME company listing on the board. So there is the SME sector is also taking off, and we have got the second application as well in terms of new products. Then going into next year, we are hoping to introduce short selling as a new product. Short selling is fundamentally where you are permitted to sell something that you don't have. You go short on a security with the intention of buying back at a later time, so that if you are very sure that the price of a share is going to fall, you immediately sell it in the morning and buy it back at a cheaper price later in the day. By that you are making a gain. So there is regulated short selling. So we're hoping to introduce that so that you can make money not only in a market that is moving up, but you also have the opportunity of making money on a market that is coming down. So both ways you can profit by the volatility in the market. So short selling is one. Stock borrowing and lending is another product that we're working on. And another third product, new product that is to be introduced is mortgage-backed securities, where we will provide a product where banks can bundle mortgages and then resell it as a product to investors, and investors can invest in those products. So those are three new products that will come into the market. Now, in 2020, another product that we have already launched, and we are awaiting certain tax incentives to be formalized, is the real estate investment trust. So that's like a unit trust which will invest in a real estate project, giving investors the opportunity to invest in a real estate investment trust, so that you don't have to put large amounts of money and buy a condominium or a property, but you can buy units in a rental property, which will give you returns from a typical real estate project. We believe, given Sri Lanka has a very active real estate market, and Sri Lankans are generally, they like to invest in real estate, the real estate investment trust instrument might be very attractive. And already we have about 2 promoters who are actively looking at issuing 2 REITs, so that investors can invest in REITs. Digitalization, I think I already touched on. Some other infrastructure developments, infrastructure development, which I will touch on very quickly. One is delivery versus payment, which you're going to implement in August. Is a back-end settlement development. If I have time, let me come back on that during question time. And the process of demutualization of the stock exchange. That is, we are changing the structure of the stock exchange. Right now, it's a company limited by guarantee, and we are trying to change that to a company limited by share. So it's a structural change that the organization is going through, which will increase the confidence of investors. And then, of course, the new generation products like commodities, derivative markets, which are probably 3-4 years away once all the necessary legal frameworks are done. So let me try to end off today by talking about a fundamental theory in markets, that in a market, you always will have 2 people taking opposing views. A buyer will always believe that the share that is buying will increase in price. And that's why he's buying that, because his expectation is that he can make a capital gain, and then the price appreciation will be there. That's why he's buying it. But at the very same time, you have a seller who believes that the price will no longer appreciate, but in fact, the price may drop, and therefore it's the right time to sell. So you need to have always, for a transaction to take place, 2 people who will take opposing views. One would think the price will increase, other one will think not. And that's why 2 people buy and sell. So all the time, every time a transaction happens, you will have 2 people who believe they are right, who will take opposing views. And then, of course, time will tell whether the buyer has gained or the seller has gained. So just a quick thought about how markets work all the time. Just a few quotes that I like to share before I wrap up. Warren Buffett was is one of the famous successful investors, and he spoke about the fact that it's better to buy a wonderful company, that is a good company at a fair price, than a fair company at a wonderful price. So I think what is indicating here is that be mindful always of the price of a share, that it has to give you the right value. Otherwise, whatever the company is, if the price is not right, that you should not buy into it. And another quote, which I think where he talks about value versus price. So you can have a market price for a share, but you also need to look at the value of a company in investing. So what is basically advising is that the market price is not necessarily right. You have to always focus on the underlying value of an investment when you're looking at share trading or share investment. So market will always have short-term volatility, and I think I shared some graphs with you which clearly shows how volatile the indices for various reasons. You can have internal reasons. The company can be doing excellently well. It can have good profitability, good management, good potential in the right industry. But you can have other external factors like interest rates, exchange rates, political instability, negative economic growth, which can dampen price. But the underlying fundamental value in the company may be there. So you necessarily cannot only look at market price. And what he's really saying is focus on the underlying value of an investment. And that's why you see, I did mention a few instances where foreign investors, also institutions, have gone and bought shares in those companies at a fairly significant price, higher price than even the market price, simply because they see value in those companies. So I think this concept of value versus price is very important factor to remember when you're looking at stock market investments. And also let me very quickly share with you one of our own local entrepreneurs, Dhammika Pereira, who started investing in the stock market with this 300,000 rupees in 1996. And some of you may have listened to him on YouTube. There's a very interesting talk he gave about how he got into the stock market. It's a very interesting story. And he has 20 years experience now. He said he spent the first 4 years learning about the stock market. And he only invested the 300,000 for the first 4 years. He said he could even afford to put $1 billion, but he did not. But he stuck to his 300,000 and bought shares and experienced the market for 4 years. It's then only he started increasing investment. And today, as you know, he's probably one of the largest shareholders in listed companies. He has, I think, investments in over 20 odd listed companies. And he says, knowledge is the key to investment. So as an investor, you should not only invest your money, but also you should invest your time. And for that, you need to learn, and that's where knowledge comes in. So with that, I think my time is nearly up. I've spoken about 1 hour. I think I'll stop with that and then take any questions that you may have for the next 15 minutes or so.
Thank you so much, sir. We have received a few questions from our participants. The first one is, what are the measures taken for the stability of the stock market during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sorry, Udamini, can you please review the question? You got it. Something
Sure,
happened.
sir.
Yeah.
What are the measures taken for the stability of the stock market during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay. So, as you can see, the first thing we tried to do is to operate uninterrupted, to operate the market uninterrupted. When the first lockdown happened, there's a very strict curfew. I think everybody was taken quite by surprise. And as a result, we found that we had to close the market. We had to close the market for nearly 1 month. And that had a very negative impact on investors across. And we saw even the day when after 1 month, when we opened, the market really crashed. So one of the first measures that we took to stabilize the market was the digitalization process, where we immediately, during that period that we were locked down and closed, we, as an industry, we very quickly put new technology processes into place to enable the market to operate in a closed environment. And when the second lockdown did happen, we were prepared, and now we are operating remotely. Today, if you see the stock exchange, for example, we have no one in office. It's remote operation. Most of the stockbrokers are operating remotely. We can open, operate, and close the market completely remotely and provide all the statistics, data, and the operations as well remotely. So the first thing that we did was to ensure that we put in processes in place to enable investors and others to access the market and to operate the market completely remotely. Now, another thing that we did was we were very sensitive to the needs of everyone, and we moved the trading hours to shorter hours, from 5 hours to now 3.5 hours, simply because we wanted to allow the settling in process to happen, and we are still not even extended that. Secondly, the shorting hours. Thirdly, is that we gave a lot of leeway for listed companies. A lot of listed companies had issues with regard to their financial statements, preparation of financial statements, submission it on time. They couldn't get their staff to their offices on time. So what we did was we gave a lot of leeway and allowances for those companies, more time to submit their quarterly accounts, to submit their annual accounts, etc. And we did away with all the requirements of submission of hard copies, did everything electronically, onboarded them on websites, etc., to allow the leeway and the flexibility for them to operate and give more time for listed companies to operate. So these are the two main measures that we took to bring in some level of stability. And as a market, I think we have performed very well. And I think one of the only few industries who are doing well during the pandemic. So if you see the market performance, the market has performed exceptionally well right throughout this period. Price appreciation has been there. The capital returns have been there. Good returns in the market, high volumes, etc. So we have seen that the stock market has been, in fact, one of the few industries who have done very well. So that we have taken all those necessary measures, including the regulatory framework, to allow a good operation of the market.
So we've received another question as well. Is there a long-term impact to the stock market due to COVID-19?
Well, impact is like this. The impact has to be always for companies and the share prices of companies. So as I said, certain companies have benefited through the pandemic, particularly those who are involved, for example, in logistics. They had phenomenal profits because their role during the pandemic has increased transportation and logistics. So we have seen certain sectors benefiting. Similarly, we have seen certain sectors and certain companies having negative growth. For example, the leisure sector, tourism and leisure sector, that has suffered. Now, their debt servicing has become a problem. Staff has become a problem. Retention of staff has become an issue. So those sectors have been suffering. So we have seen a kind of mixed reaction. But having said that, we have seen record profitability on the corporate sector side. If you take the first quarter of this year, the last quarter of last year, it has been an all-time high for corporate profitability, rightly or wrongly. So despite the pandemic, we have seen companies fighting back, getting back on board, having their processes right, changing their business models, practices to cope up with the challenges in the pandemic and still manage to overcome it, because all of them are recording record profitability. But then you're talking about the top corporates. You're not talking about the SME sector. SME sector is totally different. I think they have a real issue still. But some of the companies that are listed have overcome those issues. So different companies are reacted in different ways. And I would think, to answer the question, I don't think there will be a long-term impact, except that it all depends on how fast these companies who are affected will get back on board. For example, if it's hotels and leisure, once tourism opens up, how quickly will they bounce back in order to overcome some of their financial challenges that they have, I think. So I don't think there will be a long-term impact, because as an industry, we have already seen how the market has bounced back, how it has reacted, and how we still continue to have high levels of activity.
Udamini, shall I ask a question if it's okay? Can you hear me, Udamini?
Well, I can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
we can hear
Mr.
you.
Anji. Yeah, thank you very much. Just a quick question. It's kind of a regulatory kind of a question. Now, I think maybe 1 year back, the SEC issued a public notice on newspapers to be aware of maybe certain companies claiming to invest maybe in third party foreign accounts likewise. And we see that this is a trend that is picking up in recent times in Sri Lanka. They're using certain monetary policy leeways and special retail investors where the Sri Lankan currency is depreciating. They might find this very lucrative and they give various kind of promotions. What's your stance on this development?
Yeah, now there is a bit of regulatory issue too. Now we have seen there are certain companies that set up and they started canvassing, advertising, selling to very unsuspecting investors, saying you can invest in Apple shares, in Google shares.
Exactly.
Now, I think they are very savvy salespeople. Even I got a call once. They're very good salesmen.
Exactly.
And they're very convincing. And they show Apple, Google, Microsoft, they are all doing very well, as you can see.
Yes.
Growth, and they say we can buy those shares for you. So if you are not sharp enough, you think that's a better investment than investing in the CSE, there's better returns, and you put your money in. They give you a piece of paper or they give you access to a system which shows you have Apple shares, but no one really knows whether you are really holding that Apple share or just a piece of paper or a record in a system. Because you're not directly buying Apple shares in the New York Stock Exchange.
Exactly.
You're shares through that intermediary, and that intermediary may be regulated elsewhere. We don't know, but certainly not regulated within Sri Lanka.
In Sri Lanka, definitely, yes.
So that's a huge issue. So we went through the entire process. We complained to the central bank. Central bank did an investigation. They also couldn't really find how they send out the money. They were not sending out the money. So which means you really couldn't have been investing in those shares. And the SEC came up with these warnings. They summoned the company. They summoned the CEO of the company and warn them, but there are loopholes because SEC is not regulating that entity. So
exactly. I think they're using a BOI kind of a initiative, if I'm not mistaken.
So that's a bit of a lacuna, but I think Mr. Samil, through the new SEC Act that is now in Parliament, get better enforcement authority to catch offenders like this.
Exactly.
So hopefully we can see in the future that some of these activities may be able to be stopped, because a lot of unsuspecting investors would invest in that. And when you lose your money, you wouldn't have a regulator even to go to. You don't have a central bank and
Exactly. Because I asked this question, I also got calls. The way they speak, you understand. But if you have even a bit of understanding of how the finance system works, when you start questioning, they have all the answers, right? But then if you understand how it works, then you know there's a catch 22 situation in this. We know that when the moment we say a stockbroker, you are not legalized in Sri Lanka, then they don't have an answer for that. But they say the monetary law allows us. So that's a catch 22 situation. And for us, maybe we are aware, but as you mentioned, there are unsuspecting people who might think, oh, this is a quick way to, earn $1,000, it's dollars as well. So I guess, So thank you very much.
It's a very good question that you asked. It's unregulated activity and something that we are very concerned about.
True. Thank you very much, Rajiv. Udamini, over to you.
Thank you, sir. There's another question that we have. What are the important economic indicators we should know when investing?
I think when you look at stock markets and economic indicators, one thing you have to watch is interest rates. Now, we have found historically a low interest rate environment will mean more investments into the stock market, because you find that the returns that you get from fixed income investments is not adequate, and therefore you move your money to the stock market and you find a shift in portfolios, and the resultant demand created will push prices up and the activity up, and that is exactly what is happening right now. So interest rates is one. The second economic indicator that you can look at is the exchange rate. Now, if the exchange rate is volatile and there are expectations of a further devaluation, you will find that foreign investors will keep away from the market, and that is exactly what is happening now. If they do anticipate a further devaluation, they will wait till that devaluation happens to come in. Otherwise, they're going to lose value. So that's another indicator, because when foreign investors do again come in, you will find that they drive demand, then they will drive prices, and there's higher activity. So these are probably two economic indicators that which are relevant to stock markets, apart from general economic growth. When there is a high growth, when there is economic activity, you will find that there is demand for capital. And companies will find that the internally generated funds from their own profits is not adequate. Bank funding is not adequate. That's the time they will reach out to capital markets, because the economic activity is so much, the growth is so much, they need to expand. When they want to expand, they need additional capital, and the traditional sources are inadequate. And that's the time they will reach capital markets for their funding requirements. So that will stimulate the primary market and activity. So that's a third indicator to watch for, where there is healthy GDP growth, there is economic growth, you will find that capital markets also will grow. So these are probably three basic indicators you can look at.
Thank you, sir. We are almost coming to the end of this session. So I'd like to invite our lecturer, Mrs. Niranjana Ekanayaka, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Amini. Thank you very much. So I hope it was a very fruitful session today. And this marks the end of Finanza 21, the second session. We had the first session yesterday. So, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Rajiva Bandaranayake, the Chief Executive Officer of Colombo Stock Exchange, Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, sir, for accepting this invitation, and thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing this valuable information with us. Thank you so much. And then I would like to thank Ms. Dilanthi Galagi, Executive Secretary to CEO, because our students specifically mentioned that Ms. Dilanthi gave us a great support in contacting Mr. Rajiva. Yeah, of course. And I would like to thank Dr. M.M. Shamil, our head of the department. Thank you, sir, for being here with us amidst your busy schedule. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank Professor Sivathirasam and our stream coordinator with us. And finally, I would like to thank our students who organized this. Our main committee in Student Association of Financial Management. Thank you, students, for organizing this valuable session. And before winding up this session, I hope we can take a small photograph. Udamini?